Brad, Jonathan, and Matt, thank you so much. Oh, man, and I love that song. There have been, I have to think about how long ago it was, but that song was on my playlist for months and months and months and months when I needed that message. Yeah, that is Desiree, fabulous, fabulous piece of music. Thank you for slaying it, Glenda, for us. All right, so the problem is, we don't always feel that way, do we? We're afraid to be bold, we're afraid to be brave, we're afraid to, we got a lot of things holding us back. So, as we have been working with our theme, Emergence, Growing the Garden of Your Life, we have to talk about weeding, pruning, and composting. I know it's an incredibly exciting topic. And I thought, oh my God, this must be why the master teacher Jesus always used agricultural stories, because they make so much sense unless you're not a gardener. So for those of you who are not gardeners, hang in there. The metaphor will hopefully still work for you. But I did notice that I might have to think about this metaphor in terms of computers. Weeding, pruning, and composting. Yes, I have definitely wanted to compost my laptop. There's no question about it. So we are going to think about that. But yeah, so we've been imagining our vibrant life. We've been planting seeds and setting intentions. We've been being patient with the process. So our garden something is happening in our garden, right? As we have been focusing on not just individual manifestations, which is a perfectly wonderful thing to focus on, but really allowing our lives to emerge in a fuller way, a way in which allows us to give our gift, contribute, contribute that gift to our loved ones at work, to the planet, to the communities and places and things that we care about. Right, and we have to now see that as we are doing this work, not just in this 6-week period of time, but over the course of our lives, that the seeds actually intend to grow, right? We spent a lot of time talking about the law of growth. They are designed to grow. The very life force that lives inside an intention, Thomas Troward calls it a spiritual prototype, is actually imbued with the law that allows it and urges it to become whatever that intention is, just like a seed becomes the plant. So if we've been practicing this week patience, we're starting to trust the process. But we don't walk away from our garden, do we? If we walk away from our garden, we come back the next year, what happens? Yes, it is all overgrown and a mess, which is, of course, one of the reasons why I say no matter how long you've been here, you need to be in a class at least once a year, right? Once a year. It keeps us weeding and pruning and composting our consciousness, keeps us cultivating the soil, keeps us engaged with our practices. So we're going to talk about these things. And as I was really reflecting on all of this, because I love this metaphor so much, is that I realized that you can apply these ideas both to our inner reality and to our outer reality. We can weed and prune and compost, both looking inside and also in terms of the way in which we are engaged with the world. So Lao Tzu says this: change your thoughts, change your life. Right? Fundamental to the science of mind and to new thought and metaphysics, we recognize that when we change our thoughts, change our beliefs, when we shift our perspective, when we do the work on the inside, then the law says the outside will reflect that back to us. And so we spend a lot of time working on the inside. The other case is also true in that we can work on the outside if we know what we're doing. We can work on the outside and have it change our beliefs. This is called acting as if. Wayne Dyer says, acting as if you are what you want to become and know that you can become it, and know you can become is the way to remove self-doubt and enter your real magic kingdom. You got to be bold. You got to be brave. You got to be wiser, right? So sometimes we wait until we know on the inside. We could be waiting a long time, right? And so we act as if it were true. We act as if we are. What if we just pretended we were, in fact, spiritual beings? Right? What if we simply acted in the world as if the universe was supporting us? What if we acted as if we could, in fact, trust the process and we didn't need to worry or try to figure it out? Do you see? Acting as if begins to allow us to engage in the process, and it can rewrite and change our beliefs just as much as our beliefs will actually outpicture on the outside. So I think of this as inner and outer ways to weed, prune, and compost. We do this work both in the way that we are on the inside and the way that we are showing up. Now, this does not mean I'm weeding somebody else's garden. Nor does it mean I'm pruning their negative thoughts. We are not the consciousness police. We are not, nor am I composting things in their life I think they shouldn't be doing. That's called trying to control and manipulate the conditions out here. No, this is how we move in the world, how we show up in the world, right? Acting as if what we believe to be true is in fact true, while, of course, at the same time, we're doing our inner work, our inner weeding, pruning, and composting. So as we move through this, we're going to think about it from both of those ideas. Now, it seems to me the weeding is the most obvious, right? What are we weeding? When we're weeding our consciousness, what are we weeding? Negative thoughts. Ta-da! Pull out inner weeding. Pull out the negative thoughts. Your own, or those that have blown in. Right? What do you think you're doing? You can't do that. You're going to do what? Why would you think you could possibly do that? Who do you think you are? Or news, Facebook, right? Emails telling you how bad and awful things are. And just a little clue, right? If a headline, whether it's an email, a social media post, or a news article, if the headline offends you and causes you to have a visceral reaction, please understand it is designed to do so. Pay attention. Somebody is trying to plant something in your garden. So, when our inner weeding is to pull out our negative thoughts, we could also say our false thoughts, our false beliefs, our false ideas. This only works for other people. It's never going to work for me. If you really knew and understood me, you would realize why it wasn't going to work for me. All the ways in which we have a false idea about our identity, about who we are, about how this operates within us. In the science of mind, fundamentally, our most fundamental false belief is that we are separated from the one. We believe that our spiritual practice is to bridge the gap between us and the spiritual reality, which is, of course, nonsense because we are actually spirit showing up as individuals in the world. There is no gap. What we're doing with our spiritual practice is remembering the truth of who we are. The deepest false belief that we have is that we are separate and that we are somehow not a part of this magnificent thing that is co-creating an extraordinary life, and that we're a part of, and that we're participating by co-creating our own extraordinary life. So inner weeding is really focusing on pulling out, noticing and pulling out those negative thoughts, those false beliefs, whether they're biologically based, everything is threat and survival, whether they're culturally based, family based, or based on our own traumas and experiences that we've had in our own lives. Negative and false beliefs. And it takes diligence. Have you ever weeded a garden? Oh my gosh. And you don't get to do it just once, do you? You do it over and over and over again, and you go out there. But you know what is true is that the more you weed, the less you have to. Right? Now you're just pulling them out as they show up. Now you're starting to pull them out as they show up. Once you've done some really good weeding, you're not back to that baseline. It's now paying attention when they start poking their head up again. Oh, wait, I recognize that thought. No, I recognize that. Pulling it out. Nope, I'm not going to let you grow. And what that means is I'm not going to give you any attention. It was astonishing to discover that every thought I thought wasn't true. Have you discovered that? Why do we believe it then? Why do we believe every single thought we think? And we are biologically designed to believe the negative thought because our reptilian and limbic brain says, if I believe the negative thought, it will keep me safe. Because the negative thought is about looking for threats to our safety, security, and survival. And yet, none of us are being chased by lions, right? We're not. And so we have to be able to weed those things out. Notice when they're poking their heads up and weeding them out, because we want to move to that place where we recognize that we are more than that. We are consciousness using this organ to express and experience itself. And what an amazing thing that is. Okay, don't get me started on embodied spirituality. We shall talk about something else. Okay, outer weeding. Outer weeding is to refuse the seeds of others, negative thoughts of others. Refuse the seeds of others who want to plant them in your garden. Do not cast your pearls before swine. This is not an inundation it's not an indictment of the other person. It just reminds us. If you know somebody is going to, all those words I can't say on your dreams, you don't want to tell them. Right? There's no point in it. And we have to stop trying to convince the people who are never going to support us, never going to love us, never think that what we're going to do is going to work out, to stop trying to convince them. Right? So it's how we show up. The outer weeding is to stop trying to do that. And simply, when somebody begins to go off on a negative story, you don't have to tell them, I'm not going to be your friend if you're so negative. You might want to be their friend, or they might be a family member that, you actually love and want to be around, but you can, in your mind, nope, that's not true. Nope, that's not true. Nope, that's not true. You can keep those weeds from planting. Again, it takes diligence. The first thing I noticed when I really began practicing this is that I didn't have a whole lot to talk about with my friends and family. How much of us do we connect about, oh God, and that hot, and what happened yesterday, and that stupid boss, and my partner, and my body, and then, right? And you have lots of things to talk about. If you want to end a conversation very quickly, don't talk about anything negative. Don't participate in any of that negative talk. Diligence. It's diligence effort to train yourself not to do that. Now, this does not mean we're not empathetic and compassionate. Of course not. And it doesn't mean that we're not there for people when they're really in it. What it means is that we don't get on the bandwagon when negativity is the way in which what's going on around us is being held. And so that's our outer weeding. I often think of it as energetically negative energy that's simply in the room, right? And we're simply saying, no, it has to stop here, right? Many of us think of ourselves as very sensitive, as very empathic. And yet we can, in fact, learn to have a very permeable shield that says no. And we have a door, it's not a wall, we're not keeping people out, we have a door, but the handle is on the inside, not on the outside. This is really important. And you can do really powerful work with our practitioners, with people in therapy, with your friends, with yourself, just working with imagining that you truly are, in fact, surrounded by white light. And it's not it's just I'm going to be in charge of what I let in. The handle of the door is on my side, not on yours. This eliminates all kinds of behaviors that we're going to talk about when we get to pruning. But we can, in fact, we don't have to absorb and take it on. Of course, many of us are well trained in being codependent, extremely well trained in it. We have a belief that if we don't do it, it means we don't care. No, it actually means we care enough that we see somebody's truth. And we're going to hold the container of love and truth. And while they're swirling around, whatever it is, but we're going to hold the container of love and truth. Whether we say anything or not, do you see? It's how we're showing up. Are we being light bearers? Are we bringing light? Are we being love in that situation and not just absorbing the negativity? We cannot say it's their fault. Do you see? It's our job to weed our garden. And so that outer weeding is a diligent opportunity for us to manage not only the energy that we're sending out, but what we're allowing back in again. And to refuse to allow other people's seeds to enter into our garden. The people who do this the best, of course, are our family. They know all the buttons to push and all the ways to replant their seeds that you've been patiently digging up to replant them, right? But we have to remember we're adults now. We're adults on a spiritual path. We are no longer 4 or 6 or 10 or 12. We're no longer at the mercy of these people. We really aren't. That's part of our inner weeding. And our outer weeding is to manage what it is that we are willing to take in. Mary Baker Eddy says this fabulous thing. She says, stand guard at the portals of your mind and choose what enters in. Do you see? Yes, we're in charge of what we're generating ourselves, but we're also in charge of what we allow in. So inner and outer weeding has everything to do with thoughts and beliefs and the way in which we are managing our own and in relationship to those that are around us. Again, family, community, workplace, news, all the things that we are inundated with. A great way to do outer weeding is to take a social media fast. Or even, dare I say, a news fast. The world will still be as crazy as it was when you get back on the news. Things will have changed. Yes, it is getting better. There are lots and lots of good things happening, but it will continue to move without us. Take a break. Begin to recognize how much we're letting that in. Inner and outer weeding. All right. Pruning. Pruning is such an interesting thing when we think of it in terms of our spiritual practice. So inner pruning, right? We all know what pruning is. If you allow a plant to grow, you over-fertilize it, over-water it, you allow it to grow without paying attention, it can become very leggy, right? And it gets really big, really fast, and then what happens? It falls over. It can't hold its own weight. Some things need to be pruned. Roses need to be pruned back so that it doesn't expend any energy on old roses or old stalks. You force all of its energy into its three most primary branches, stalks, thank you. What is that? You force all of their energy into the three strongest ones when you prune back, and then you get this exuberant flourishing of flowers because the rose bush isn't wasting any energy. Do you see? Pruning is incredibly important. And for those of us who we just want to have everything. We want to have everything all the time. We want everything. We seldom prune. Okay. This was a hard lesson I had to learn. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. So inner pruning, develop focus. You cannot do everything all at once. Really. Sorry to say, but you can't, because we are embodied souls, embodied spirits. We do live within the space-time continuum. It is amazing how much we can stretch that and Play-Doh it and do all kinds of things, but you can't be 12 and 40 at the same time. You just can't. You can have the spirit of a 12-year-old in a 40-year-old body, but you still can't be those two things at the same time. And sometimes we are hesitant to choose, aren't we? We're afraid we're limiting ourselves by focusing on the one thing that's really important to us at the moment. And yet, do you see, by pruning off the things, well, I might want to do that. Well, I might want to do that. Well, maybe I want to do that. Well, I don't know. Do you see, we're letting our bush get super leggy. And everything is growing, and it can really become unable to produce the kind of flowers that we want. Develop focus. Stay on purpose. Stay on that focus. Trust yourself. If you have chosen something, unless or until you don't choose it anymore, don't worry about doors that close, windows that close, because that's part of the pruning. Well, that wasn't the path, and that wasn't the path, and that's not a part of it. Stay on purpose and be willing to choose. We are choosing beings. Choosing not to choose is a choice. Not choosing because we're afraid or uncertain or we want to know what is the right choice, we are making a choice by not choosing. And so if we're co-creative beings, part of how we experience what we're creating, test it out, as we choose it. We can always choose again, which is, I think, the thing that I forget the most, is that I can and choose again, but I have to choose in the first place. And so engaging on this on the inside with focus, purpose, and choosing really helps us not fritter away our energy on things we might want to do, things we might one day want to do, but to ask ourselves, what is this vibrant life we're creating? And what choices are we making because of it? Outer pruning, this was as hard for me as inner pruning, because I didn't want to miss out on anything. So I just wanted to say yes to everything, do everything, and I wanted to have it all at once, right? Outer pruning is learning to say no. We spend a lot of time saying yes to life, and yes to spirit, and yes to the unfolding process, and yes to what's emerging. But pruning is the no. No, I'm not going to spend time on that. No, I'm not going to allow that in my life. No, I'm not going to be distracted by that. Learning to say no is an incredibly empowering spiritual practice. It's also a powerful spiritual practice inside. We didn't put it on the inner pruning when we say, no, that's not my truth, right? We're helping the weeding by continuing to say no. Outer pruning, learning to say no. First of all, you will have to learn how to say no when you want to say no. Maybe I'm the only one in the room who needed to learn that. But I was taught to accommodate. I was taught to, especially as a young person, as a little one, I was taught that it was rude to say no. And for all of us women in the room, might have even been exponentially so, because it's just not nice. It's not nice. That's not nice. What do you mean, no? What do you mean, no? Well, no, I don't want to do that. We're working with with Aria right now. What are the things she can say no to, and what are the things she can't? She cannot say no to going to bed, eating food, getting her pull-up changed. These are not up for discussion. But other things may be. Do you want to do this? You said you want to have a bath. You want to have a bath now? No. Okay. If today's not bath night, okay. If you don't need a bath, okay. Right? Allowing her to discover the efficacy of saying, no, I don't want to do that. Yeah, learning to say no when you actually want to say no. And so pruning is now going through your life and asking yourself, what have you said yes to that you don't want to say yes to either anymore, or that you said yes to when you really meant no? And start pruning them out. So as your vibrant life grows, and you're doing your weeding, and you're in your discipline, and you're being patient with the process, and all of that kind of stuff, you're going to have a whole new level of pruning come to the forefront. And that is learning to say no when you want to say yes. You want to say yes to building a business. You want to say yes to moving out of the country. You want to say yes to going back to school. And you want to say yes to spending all your time with your family. How many of us overcommit? And because we're on a spiritual path, they are all actually things we want to do. But maybe we've said yes to too many things. Pruning is also learning how to say no when you want to say yes. Do you see, this is fundamentally based on our inner pruning, our ability to choose. Am I saying yes to things because it's distracting me from the things I really want to be doing or I really feel called to do? Am I saying yes to things because I don't know how to say no? Am I saying yes to things because I want people to like me? Am I saying yes to things because I want to belong? Or am I saying yes to things because this is part of my focus and my purpose and how I want to show up in the world? Learning to say no when you want to say yes. That was as hard for me as simply learning how to say no in the first place. So, weeding, pruning, and my all-time favorite, composting. You know what compost is, right? For the most part, compost is that stuff that comes out of the back end of cows and chickens, and and then we add scraps and things to it, composting. And what happens, for those of you who are not gardeners, what happens with a good compost pile? You get the richest soil there is. The most alive soil in which your seeds will grow better than anything else, right? It's one of those weird paradoxes. Okay, inner composting. It's the shit in our minds, right? Really, oh my God, come on. We call that shadow work. That's what we call that. Inner composting is shadow work. All that stuff that we've flushed and we didn't want to see, but it didn't actually go anywhere. Right? Inner composting is doing our shadow work. It's paying attention to how people perceive us and recognizing that there might be something coming around, which is our shadow. We might be behaving out of an inner belief that we are not willing to see or look at, or something that we have buried so deep that it has not yet been able to be transformed into this gold, this extraordinary gold that shadow work gives us. Part of shadow work is forgiving. Forgiving ourselves for all the things that we have not yet been able to make amends for, and forgiving others. This is huge and valuable work, this work. Everybody's doing the best they can. I remember when I discovered that about my dad. when I realized that his rageaholic and alcoholic behaviors was when I realized how much pain he must have been in, what it must have been like to live inside his life, what he had experienced as a child. And I recognized that he was, in fact, doing the best he could. And when I was able to do that, forgiveness was a non-issue anymore. Because I've always done the best I could, and I've made messes. Even doing the best I could to forgive. Not forget, not put ourselves in dangerous positions again, not being around abusive and toxic people, but to forgive our past and those people in it. To let go of it. To let go of it. Shadow work also allows us to remind ourselves that those things that happened in our childhood, we're the ones who are now playing it out and dragging it forward. Those people aren't doing it to us anymore. We're now the ones who are reliving it, telling the story over and over and over again, feeling all of that. And remember, just because you think it or feel it doesn't make it true. So inner composting is to begin to let go of those stories. They are not actually who you really are. We tell them because sometimes we think that's who we are, and we want people to know how brave we were or how traumatized we've been. And yet when we can let go of that, do you see, we can start telling an entirely different story about our own lives. And so we can compost those old stories because that's over and done with. We're only keeping it alive in our own minds and in our bodies. Cellular memory, there's all kinds of ways to work with it from our bodies, our emotions, and our minds. Stop defending and stop attacking. Right? These are the behaviors, these are the ways that we think of it in our own minds, that really comes from that fear, right? That fear or self-doubt that motivates us. So our shadow work helps us to stop doing these things because we're paying attention to not just what we want to manifest, not just what we want to see, but we're actually looking at all this, well, garbage, for lack of a better word, and seeing it as garbage. Now, when you look at your garbage and you see your garbage, do you paw through it? No, what do? You throw it out. You put it in the compost if it's compostable, right? So yes, there's a certain amount of understanding of what happened and how it's affecting us today, but at some point, it has to go out with the garbage, so that it stops activating these behaviors that are out of fear and self-doubt. Inner composting. Inner composting is really powerful work. You go to therapy, you go to your practitioners, right? You stay in classes, and I promise you, you will do this work. And it is gold. Carl Jung was the one who started the idea of shadow work, and it's all the parts of us that we find unacceptable, all the beliefs and things and trauma and all that. But there's also those parts of us that are so magnificent that we find equally unacceptable. Our light that was so frightening to others that we learned to put a bushel over it. And again, composted soil turns into gold. Compost that you put in the soil, it turns into gold. So the same thing happens with our outer composting. Outer composting really comes from the empathy and compassion that happens when we do our inner work. When we do our inner work, empathy and compassion are the result. You can't actually manufacture empathy and compassion without doing the inner composting work. We call that a spiritual bypass. So empathy and compassion, make amends. Tell people you're sorry. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to tell people you're sorry. Wow, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to say it that way. Wow, I'm really sorry that hurt. I guess I wasn't paying attention. Wow, I'm really sorry I didn't do what I said I was going to do. Our system thinks we're going to die if we say we're sorry. Something really bad is going to happen, but the other is actually the truth. When we make amends, say we're sorry, recognize what we have done or how it has affected another person, do you see we're turning that potentially bad situation, bad feeling, and the bad thing that we want to now shove into the shadow, we are already starting to turn it into gold. Listen. Listen. It doesn't mean you have to agree. Doesn't mean you aren't also going to talk. But listening allows us to recognize that we just don't know everything. We don't. We don't know what's going on with the other person. We don't know how it's unfolding. We don't know where they're coming from until we listen, right? And so we're composting our belief that we always know what's going on and that we're always right and that we always understand. We don't always. But if we can listen, right, then we can really accept with empathy and compassion what somebody is saying to us, even if we don't understand it. We don't have to. They don't have to justify or explain or defend it. Just listening begins to bring that space. The other side of listening is tell the truth. We do a lot of damage by pretending everything is okay, by allowing things to grow that if we nipped them in the bud, to use a gardening metaphor, if we nipped it in the bud, we would not have this big giant misunderstanding or this big giant uncertainty or this big giant to-do because we told the truth at the beginning. No, I don't see it that way. No, I just not certain that that's the best thing for us to do. I'd like for us to think about it differently. No, when you speak to me like that, it does actually hurt. It's not okay. It hurts me when you speak like that. Tell the truth. And finally, don't try to be perfect. Okay, maybe I'm just outing myself, right? I was raised to be perfect. Oh my goodness, right? Don't make messes, make mistakes, try stuff, generate manure. Really, I'm serious. That's how it begins to become gold, is don't try to be perfect. Don't pretend. All of these things, weeding, gardening, composting. For those of you who are not gardeners, I promise I'm going to find a computer analogy for all of this. I'm sure of it. For those of you who aren't gardeners. But, right, now, I want you to really notice something about weeding, pruning, and composting. This is what I want you to notice. None of this has to do with making the plants grow. None of it. It's about nurturing a consciousness in which they will flourish. It's not about standing over your seed and saying, grow, 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 right? You've set the intention, you've done the thing, you're growing the garden, you're allowing it to become vibrant. It's going to be a little, maybe a little chaotic while you're trying to figure out, is that really what you wanted to plant? Did you want to plant it there? All of that. But the universal law will take care of the growth, right? We just spent 3 weeks talking about that. Our job is to create a consciousness in which those seeds can flourish. Those intentions can become what they are meant to be. Weeding, pruning, and composting is about creating the consciousness in which our lives can flourish, in which our light can shine, in which the contribution that we are here to give can flow out in whatever ways we choose for it to flow out. It's the plant's job to grow. It's designed to grow. The universe is on your side. It wants to live as the seeds that you are planting. It wants to flourish in the garden of your life. So this week, I invite you to pay attention. Are you weeding? Inner, outer. Are you pruning? Inner, outer. Are you composting? Don't be afraid. There's gold there. And so it is.